Hey, let me be a boomer. Yeah. My kids are always calling me boomer, man. They're like you're such a boomer. I was like, yes, I am. I was like, you are correct. The boomers pay for every generation that followed them. Last time we had left on, what were we talking about? I think we were talking about the definition of backbiting, right? Was that it? Oh, backbiting, that not being limited to the tongue. So we had said that. What are other types of backbiting? Like gestures, indication, nodding, winking. So the thing is, I guess the nice thing after reading through this and going through this is that this is not something that is unique to the modern era. like these things happen historically. It's not strange to understand or see people that even in the past that this idea of nodding or winking or indicating was actually a way to make fun of people. Yes. WhatsApp.
I think technically you're not using your phone.
Yeah. So I mean, so now there are so many more modes of communication. Like texting is one, instant messaging, using WhatsApp, Telegram, whatever other methods of social media there are. Not just that. Sometimes people are in on a group thing, and I mean, I'm only familiar with Facebook, so you guys will have to forgive me. Like I use Instagram, I use in a very limited capacity, but basically liking somebody's post, but you do it as a group just to, try to make fun of that person or to single that person out. And it's unfortunate. And I think we had talked about before how there are less filters when we're dealing with each other now than there were previously. And one of the reasons there are less filters is because there's less face-to-face interaction. You actually can't see the response of the person. So I think we had gone through some of these. Oh yeah, we had talked about the Qari. So why did we say that the Qari of the Quran was the most problematic of all of the different people who backbite? Like he might have had like a personal beef. Yeah. Allahu Alam, maybe.
Role model.
Right, because the Qurra are considered what? They're role models, right? They're considered role models in the community, and not just that. And this is something again that is not unique to Ghazāli's time, but even today, when we look at a Qari, automatically we equate him with what? With knowledge, right? We equate him with knowledge, we equate him with clergy, we equate him with the scholarly class. So the moment he does or says something, he misrepresents that clergy class. Why is that a problem? Okay, yeah, so it gives this implication or this implied permission for other people to do it. And not just that, now when people look at the Qari backbiting, what do they say? Not just a permission, that was the other part of it. Yeah, not just state of Islam, it's like, oh man, like freaking the clergy, I mean, there's like, I'm sorry? Or why am I talking about the Quran? That's, okay, why do you guys think so? So ideally, nobody should be in the position of similitude except who? Yeah. The Prophet Muhammad, right? There's no doubt about that. Like Islamically, we agree on this. But why is it that we put certain people on a pedestal? Right? Knowledge, sure. But a Qari, why do we put a Qari on the pedestal? Because Hamil Quran, like we would assume, right? We would assume that this person has memorized the entire book of Allah, and the book of Allah itself is blessed. Therefore, the person who carries it is also blessed. Is that necessary that he is? No, it's not. Right? Is there a chance? Absolutely. Is there a chance? And I guess this brings us to another important tarbawi question. How important is it for children to memorize the book of Allah?
It's better for them to understand.
So, I mean, number one, what is the purpose of the Quran? To guide our lives. And like, how can I guide my life can I guide my life through parroting it? So parroting, I don't mean to use this in like a negative connotation, but by parroting, like, so when a parrot speaks and says a word, does it actually understand the word that it's saying? No. So that's what I intend by it. So basically, when a person parrots the Quran, they're reciting it, but the problem is that many times they're not what? they're not internalizing or understanding what it is that they are reciting. So as a community, as a Muslim community, what in terms of a priority, or as a Muslim family, for those who have children or plan on having children, on how high up on the priority scale, and like I'm not talking to the Somalis, right? So how high up how high up on the priority scale does being a hafiz mean? Is it just with the, so the thing is, I'm not 100% familiar with the Somali community. Is it just with the guys or like with the girls too? With the girls too? MashaAllah. Wow, that's amazing. So how high up should it be on a family scale? Like this idea of memorizing the Book of Allah. You think it should pretty high? Okay. No. Oh, sure. So it's praiseworthy. It's beneficial for your akhirah. Okay. So okay. I don't know. I'm asking you guys. I'm curious. Okay, sure. So over here, if I had to choose, right? If I had to choose, is the internalization and understanding more a priority or the memorization? Right, internalizing and applying it, right? We all agree that that's definitely more important than just raw memorization. And how do I gauge the memorization or the ability of the child? Because does everyone have the potential to be a good Muslim? Yes, right? Like everybody has that potential. Does everybody have a potential to be a hafiz? Not necessarily. Hold on. So can I ask a follow-up question? So if we say that all children have the ability to memorize the Quran, what percentage of them maintain it? I'm just curious. What percentage do you think maintain it? I don't know. I think it's a, they keep it memorized. Yes. Okay, so you're putting the concepts and the principles and the internalization as more important, and I don't think anybody's challenging that, but I definitely do agree with you. Yes.
Memorizing the text also has value. So internalizing it wouldn't be on the same plane. You wouldn't be able to say that someone understands Quran. So the idea of memorizing is a shortcut of you provide the understanding and memorization. Structurally, different people, different khulafa, like throughout history, some different ways of doing it, which is like the concept, and then the way it happens in other cultures. In the
how did they do it?
So people would go usually to the ulama depending on the different reasons, and this is based on a limited knowledge of different. Is that people would go to the hafiz and usually they would have it memorized before a church week. It would be accompanied also with the Tazkīyah and like the Ghazāli and all these things of memorizing. So it comes with different ways, but understanding all these things are parallel.
Okay, so those would be the ones who sent their kids to the madrasa. And even the scholars who are talking about that, they're talking about within the scope of the madrasa. Did 100% of the Muslim ummah become scholars? No, like we know that. What percentage of the ummah would you guys say go into Islamic studies, for lack of a better term? Like even history, like maybe 5%, 10%, right? You know, and I'll be generous. You know, I'll give you guys an extra 5. So if we say that 10% of the scholarly class or people who are interested in this Islamic knowledge, they're the ones who are actually going and doing all these things that you're saying. What about the other 90%? What are they supposed to be doing?
Well, there are narrations where the couple of kids talk it and he was taking a few hours and they would memorize in Islam and make it part of their life.
Sure. Okay, so I definitely agree with that. Ibn Umar, he said that we used to memorize 10 verses at a time, and we would try to act on them and make sure that we understood them, etc. And like interestingly enough, Anas radiallahu anh, he said, how many companions memorized the Book of Allah, like from beginning to end? Okay, a couple hundred, few. He mentioned 7. He mentioned 7. And this doesn't mean that it was unimportant or anything like that. It was, the reason it was 7 is because the book hadn't been compiled up until that point. Was that, and not just that, it wasn't revealed like, Fatiha, Baqarah, Ali Imran, Nisa, etc. It was revealed in different places, in different spaces. So the practicality of actually sitting down and memorizing it, it will require somebody who has extremely strong memory and somebody who spent a lot of time with the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. I mean, can you imagine like a Bedouin coming out and be like, hey, teach me about Islam? He's like, yeah, there's 5 pillars of Islam, 6 pillars of Iman. He's like, all right, good looks. And then just, and then I'm going back out to, my family in the desert. Like those people, they didn't memorize anything. They're like, okay, this is what I need to be and what I need to do to be Muslim. And not just that, even Anas, he died like 80 Hijri. So he was the last major companion to die. And he says that there are still companions of the Prophet ﷺ who are out there from the Bedu, like from the Bedouins. Meaning that these people, they weren't scholars in any way, shape, or form, right? They were just people who happened to meet the Prophet ﷺ either at Hajj, or they came and they visited, they came to Masjid Nabawi, whatever the case might be, and then they went back out to wherever it was that they were at. So, and again, that era is very unique in the sense that there was no written Quran, right? There's no book that was compiled up until that time. So understanding why there was such a limited number of Huffaz is very clear and it's very understandable. Now, this culture of seeking Islamic knowledge and these types of things, it did become large, right? It did become a very practical way. But the thing is, you still had people who had to do business, right? You still had statesmen, you still had people who had to make roads, you still had cobblers, you still had people who were farming, and not just that, agrarian society. So when we talk about people who lived like this farm type of livelihood, when did that continue until? In the Industrial Revolution. And how far away was the Industrial Revolution? It was like 200 years ago. It wasn't even that long ago. So you're talking about a majority of mankind. Now, we're not talking about like, just the Muslim. Majority of mankind didn't start moving into cities and like, working in workshops and like, working in these places until about 200 years ago. So this idea of going and getting educated, a lot of mankind was very illiterate for a very long time. It's only when people actually started gathering that they started learning. Hold on. Sure.
If you're not acting on yourself to keep yourself in step with your own beliefs, then someone else will impose their beliefs on you, even if slightly slow. So things will start to depend on you, even if you don't want to.
Okay. Right. So the
added effort, the emphasis on memorization, if it's paired with understanding, because it's personal for me, or at least people who like remember someone on a regular basis, along with their other families.
Sure. I'm not dismissing it, right? The question is, even the question of like how important is it, it can even go even further in saying how important is it to you, right? Because everybody's going to have their own scale of important things, and going and spending time to memorize the book of Allah or spending time every day, is it noble?
Yeah,
absolutely, right? There's nobody who's going to deny that. Is it blessed? Yeah, absolutely. I don't think anybody's going to deny that. But different people have different priorities in their life, and that's something that's important to recognize, and it's something that's important to respect. Just because somebody doesn't send their kid to go do I now have the right to look down on that person? No, right? Like I don't. And if they're going to send their kid to have, I can't look down on that person and be like, man, they're wasting this kid's time. They're putting unnecessary pressure on him. You know what I mean? Like, are there some kids who might fall into that category? Yeah, sure, right? There's some kids like they clearly don't have an aptitude nor an interest. Does it make sense now to push that kid in that direction? No, it doesn't. So I think all of these things definitely do apply. Yes.
So for the rest of us, for more on the business side of things, not like don't have that much time to do events and all that stuff. Is the biggest thing that we just follow the page now, so like the 5% of Muslims who actually all like spending time to learn this and memorize it?
Sure. So here, let me answer this question another way. If I had a problem with my pipes, where am I going to go? What? If I had a problem with the piping in my house, where do I go? I go to the plumber. If I have a problem, like it's like, okay, my lights aren't working. Right, I would go to an electrician. If I don't understand something about Islam, where should I go? I go to the Quran myself. I go to Google Scholar. Right? And that's the thing. I mean, it's a very natural channel.
Yeah.
Right. Anytime I have a problem with something, like even if I have like some type of spiritual issue, ideally, who should I go? I should go to a spiritual doctor, right? People who can actually guide me and help me. Like, am I having a crisis in faith? Okay, then go to somebody who can actually help you with that. Yeah, go ahead.
The reason I asked this question is that because people need
Yeah.
Turn back into the kind of lie.
Sure.
People, because then they start coming in, something, maybe forget something.
So I think these are all very valid points, but I don't think that's exactly what she meant. Yes, I think it's more so if you're not on top of things, it's very easy for foreign ideas to creep in, right? And it doesn't have to be memorization. You just need to be on top of yourself, and you need to be steadfast. Like as Muslims, we need to have that waqaya. We need to have that. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He uses the word taqwa on purpose, right? Taqwa is a shield. And what is it protecting us? It's protecting us from these things. And how do I increase my taqwa? I increase it with yaqeen. And what is yaqeen? Yaqeen's conviction. How do I prevent foreign ideas from coming in, or how do ideas that are antithetical to Islam? I need to convince myself with the ideas that I have. And how do I convince myself with those ideas? This is why seeking knowledge is so important, right? It's not just memorizing this poem or understanding this book, no. There are questions that I have, right? Because it's a very individual thing. That's what deen is. It's a very individual thing. There are questions I have as an individual, as a person, that I need to answer. And why do I need to answer them? Because I need to put my heart at ease. And every time I put my heart at ease, I'm increasing my yaqeen. And the more somebody tries to attack me or attack my religion, I'm protected. Because the one thing that's very important to keep in mind is the truth is going to be the heaviest thing out there. Anything else is going to be light. And the moment truth drops, everything else flutters. And that's part of yaqeen. That's part of conviction, is understanding these things. And I have to get that understanding. And that understanding can be like, there's no question that's taboo in Islam. Even Ibrahim alayhi salam, what did he ask Allah? He said, Arini kayfa tuhil mawta. Show me how you bring life to death. Like, this question in and of itself is problematic. Yes or no? Yeah. Right? Like, it almost sounds like a challenge, which is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what does He do? He says, Awalam tu'min? Like, do you not believe? And how does He respond? He said, okay, yatma'inna qalbi. So that I can bring my heart ease. I need to understand this process. I need to understand the mechanism here. Right? And this is with anything. Like Ibrahim is, like alayhi salam, he's one of the greatest examples of intellectual curiosity within a religious paradigm. You know what I mean? Like, he questions everything. He's like, you know what I mean? He has you want to talk about like the skeptic of the philosophers? Like, he has that skepticism. And that skepticism, and it has to be a healthy amount. Obviously, there are certain things that you're welcome to question, but they just become so abstract, it's difficult to deal with. Like, do I really exist? You know what I mean? Like, existential crises, I don't think that's a problem for most people. It's a problem for some, but I don't think it's a problem for most people. Most people have issues with like, well, how do I know God's real? How do I know Islam's the right religion? Right? And I don't think there's a problem with any of those questions, because if either you believe or you don't, right? It just simply boils down to that. Like, and in order for me to believe something, I need to be convinced, right? I believe that it's true. I need to be convinced that it's true. How do I convince myself? By asking those questions that are appropriate and staying on top of those questions. Every time I have a question, bring it up. Talk to someone. And it's not necessary that me, Imam Farhan, has the answer, right? Because I'm not Islam. I'm just Imam Farhan. But Islam does have the answer. And if you won't find it with me, you'll find it with someone else. Yes?
But I also say that younger children, going back to memorization, if I could for 1 second, I was thinking younger children are more malleable and they adapt very quickly.
Sure.
So we kind of let them memorize maybe when they're early. Like I went to Catholic school, I still remember their prayers.
Yeah.
So memorization seems easier when you're little. Now I'm trying to memorize certain surahs, and it's taking me a really long time. Sure. So I think there's some is there utility in memorizing when you're young? Absolutely. But the thing is, how do you gauge that? Number one, is it a family priority? Right? That's the first question. Is it a priority for me as a father or me as a mother that my child be a hafiz of Quran? Right? That's the question. Like, do I feel that my kids need to know some Quran? Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's any difference on that. At the minimum, I need to know at least Quran enough that I can what? That I can pray, right? That's the least utility that I have to have. That's like the minimum standard there. Now, can I increase on that? Like, the more, the better, or I mean, whatever the case might be. But again, like, those family values, they're not ones that anybody can judge, because there's no wrong answer, right? Is there better? Is there worse? Yeah, absolutely. It's like someone will be like, well, yeah, my kid's going to be a hafiz. I was like, yeah, well, my kid's going to be a hafiz and mufassir.
It's like, oh yeah, well, my kid's going to be Hafiz, Mufassir, and Usuli, right? You know what I mean? Like, it's just, it's in like, and he's going to be a mayor and a doctor. You know what I mean? Like, it can, there's no end to getting better, right? You know, you can always be better. There's never like, there's no ceiling, right? There's no ceiling, but there definitely is a floor, right? There definitely is a floor. Yes.
My experience with the campaign, I was on the Quran at around 8. I remember asking the Imam to explain a certain verse, and so you don't need to know it right now.
Yeah. Yeah. So do you agree with him?
Yeah.
Okay. It's like, shut up, keep memorizing. So, I mean, I personally have a general rule. If somebody's asking, then they deserve an answer, right? That's just a general rule I have. The only thing I might do is I might adjust the answer based on the maturity of the child, right? And this is something that's important. So if my 13-year-old asks me about like homosexuality, it's going to be a very different answer than what my 7-year-old asked me. And she did come home one day. She's like, Baba, what's gay? So you have to give an age-appropriate answer, because you can't tell her like, oh, don't worry about that. Obviously, she heard it from somewhere. And if I'm not going to give her an answer, she's going to go and find out from one of her friends or whatever the case might be. So I told her, I was like, it's when men marry men and women marry women. And in Islam, that's not allowed. You know, and again, it's not, I didn't have to get graphic enough for her to, it's just enough for her to kind of understand the concept. And it might not be the best answer, but at least it was an answer that she could kind of understand what the concept was and why it was problematic. Huh? That's a good answer? Okay, so how far did we get? Oh, here. So why focus on the reciters? We had talked about this, right? And this is one of the things that was important, that there's a false sense of clerginess, or like, you know, that these individuals give off. And what happens is that when that's there, it's very easy to break the relationship between the laity and the scholars. Why do we want to preserve that? Or we don't want to preserve it? Right, they're supposed to be the source of guidance. And the moment we break that relationship, where's the lay Muslim going to go? Nowhere. He's going to try to figure it out himself, right? He's just going to start like making stuff up, and like, you know, he's just going to, and you can have all in this, and then people wonder, well, we have all these types of wild interpretations. But the reality is like, okay, relationships, and we had mentioned this in the previous class, relationships are always what? They're always two-sided. There's always two, right? You can't always blame the lay people for not listening to the clergy. You can't, because the clergy did something to lose their trust. And that happens, right? It's very easy. Trust is a very fragile vessel, and it has to be maintained from both sides. It can't just be a one-sided effort, and you can't blindly trust the Imam when he tells you to shut up and keep memorizing. But so it's and this is the moment that we are not able to direct or channel the energy of our children or the questions that they have. This is where we start having problems and where we start having issues. And now our children, or like, you know, new Muslims or people who are coming back to the religion, when they go to ask these questions and they don't get answers, what happens?
They'll figure it out.
They'll figure it out. Allahu Akbar.
They'll go online.
Right. Well, they'll go try and find other answers. Oh, okay. Yeah, they'll go and try and find other answers, and because they're trying to find other answers. Yeah, I think somebody's playing with the mic. They'll try to find other answers, and those are not the right answers. Whose kid? I'm saying whose kid is still in the masjid? Like I'm trying to figure out like who left their kid. Like this is a problem. But it's always important to learn how to channel these questions, because if we can't answer the questions, then what happens is that individual, he now feels that it's not he that doesn't have the answer, but who doesn't have the answer? Islam doesn't have the answer, right? Like they equate that, and this is why, you know, even if an individual doesn't have an answer or doesn't have a solution, that these solutions be presented and so, or taken to someone who has the answers, right? Like and this is many times a failure of many parents, is what happens is their ego comes in when they don't know the answer to something. And what do? They'll be like, oh, don't worry about that. Or, oh, go do this. Oh, go read Ayatul Kursi 3 times. You shouldn't be asking such type of questions. You know what I mean? Like, and these are how they do. Why do they do that? Because they don't know. And instead of being humble and actually taking them to somebody who does know the answer, they try to divert the attention and be like, okay, yeah, he's a child, but he's not an idiot. Right? He's going to realize that there's some disconnect here. There's something wrong here, or that, oh, Islam must not have the answer to this question. So we had also said that if I'm in a majlis, if I'm in a gathering, or if I'm in a setting where people are doing backbiting, people are making ghibah. What? Like who's like? I'm trying to figure out whose kids are still here. That you should, in some way, shape, or form, express that you're displeased with the conversation that's going on. This is not something that should have our tacit approval. We should not allow backbiting to happen in our presence. And there are a number of reasons why we do allow it. Because if the reason we don't allow it is because if we really intended well for the person, we would just go and approach the person directly. How am I benefiting by talking about him in a third-party setting? It doesn't make sense. So over here, you have some people who say these kind of statements that, that unfortunate soul has been tested by severe illness. May Allah forgive him and us. So over here, this is problematic. Is this person has ill intent. There's a reason that he's saying this. He's trying to expose this individual. And why do we know that? Because he's pointing him out directly and he's naming him. And this is part of ghibah, right? This is part of backbiting. And he thinks that because he's saying something nice about this person and making dua for this person, he can hide the backbiting under the veil of this dua. And this is why it's problematic. And this is actually worse. This is actually worse than backbiting itself. Another way, acting surprised about a particular person. Wow, I didn't know he was like that, right? And this is something that we hear, and sometimes even about famous people, right? Oh, I would never imagine that he would have done that. How many of us have fallen into it? Right? And this is, if I really wanted islah for the person, if I wanted reconciliation for the person, why wouldn't I just approach him directly? And even if a person is a public figure, who doesn't have access to them publicly? Like if you're a public figure, how difficult is it for me to get in contact with that public figure? If I really cared, right? That's the question I really need to ask myself. Do I really care? And am I obligated to care about every single person? No, I'm not. I'm obligated to care about myself and my family first and foremost, and then those people who are close to me, my family members, etc. But for me to claim that, no, I care about this guy who's in like Wyoming about, no, man, you don't. You're just fooling yourself, man. You're just looking for an excuse to backbite this person or to spread slander and gossip. So he also mentions the one who's silent is similar to the one who's backbiting, meaning that if you're in a sitting and people are backbiting and you're allowing it to happen, this is a type of tacit approval. So what if I'm in a position where, for example, I'm sitting around a bunch of elders, right? And I'm sure some of us have been in that position. And like, it's your mother and her friends and they're talking about someone. And if you say something, it's just going to erupt into something worse. What do I do in that situation? I should hate it in my heart, at the least, right? Or I should try to walk away, and remove myself from the situation. But this is really important. Sit there and be like, I really dislike this. I really don't enjoy this. And also try to remember, would I react the same if I was sitting with my friends and they were doing this? Because sometimes we have less tolerance for people in authority. Why? Because we really can't do anything about it. But when we're in a situation amongst peers and we can do something about it, do we find ourselves more tolerant or not? And if I allow it to happen, meaning that if I don't even feel anything, this is a problem. And I've told this to multiple people. If I'm going and I'm seeking help, if I'm going and I'm looking for answers, if I'm going and I'm praying, if I'm going and I'm feeling guilty, all of these are signs of what? Iman. Because just imagine if I didn't have those feelings. That just means that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is allowing me to drift further and further and further away. The fact that I'm feeling that prick in my heart, the fact that I'm feeling something nudge at me and pull at me, these are all signs of Iman. And what is the best thing to do? Act on those feelings. Right? Act on those feelings take an opportunity to make adhkar, take an opportunity to thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, for even allowing us to be in that position. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala keep us from those who have remorse when we do bad things. So this is a good question. So he wants him to continue backbiting this person, but he tells him like, hey, you shouldn't do that, man. What do you?
Well, it's one thing to have desires, and the other thing is when we're battling those desires.
Sure.
It's one thing, and secondly, if you are really intending in your heart.
Yeah. So what? So, yes.
Depends on like how much you know the outcome. If you know your friend is gonna turn away, and it's more or less just for your own conscience. You're like, oh, it's not funny. Don't tell me it's funny. Like you already know. You're trying to. It could either be that, or you are actively maybe trying to resist it. Physically, in your heart, you don't feel it.
Okay.
So you make it kind of secure.
All right. So I guess the first situation is like you're secretly egging him on.
Yeah. Well,
is it? Yeah.
You said everything is based on relationship, right?
Yes.
You establish a relationship with a person. You know they're going to keep talking.
Yes.
And you know some that will actually stop.
Okay.
So you're like, I know this person's going to keep talking, but I'm just going to say this to make myself feel better that I actually tried.
Oh, to like kind of like remove the blame from myself.
Yeah, remove the blame.
Okay.
And I know they're going to keep talking.
Okay.
And then the second situation is that you actively try to do it is like with your tongue to try to stop it.
Because you're trying to better yourself.
Yeah.
Like you want to get yourself to a state. You're not at that station where you hate it yet, but you're working to get to that station. All right. See what Ghazāli says. He said this is but what you're saying is actually an exceptional case. It's actually so a person who's trying, why would Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala not reward that person for trying, right? But over here, this is somebody who not only like because he loves it. That's the do you see the problem? Right? He wants him to continue. He actually enjoys it, right? There's a pleasure that he's taking in it. And because he's enjoying it, he said, this is a type of hypocrisy. Like, nah, that's not good enough. You're still going to be accountable. So this tells us about the depth and harms of backbiting and just how bad it is. That this is something that even with your heart, you need to learn how to escape. So motioning to stop, is that good enough?
That person sees that.
All right. So it's like you can kind of like free yourself. And somebody's like, it's like, yeah, man, he's so stupid, and blah blah. And you're like, huh? Is it what is that Drake meme? It's like, that's good enough. So like a wave of the hand or a wink, like, come on, man. You know what I mean? Like, or a nod. All these things. He says it's not enough. It's stopping needs to be clear and pronounced. And again, you can show, like, you can see the depth and the problem with backbiting just by how he's dealing with it and just by how much reinforcement is being mentioned here. We have to protect the honor of the Muslim, right? That's what it all boils down to. It doesn't matter if I like him, it doesn't matter if I dislike him, it doesn't matter the nature of the relationship I have, it doesn't matter if he's my enemy. I am duty bound to protect his honor. So here's some narrations that I mentioned. If a believer is belittled in front of you and you're able to help him, then Allah will belittle you in front of others on the day of judgment. May Allah protect us. Whoever protects his brother's honor, Allah protects his face from the fire on the day of resurrection. And whoever protects his brother's honor in his absence, then it is your right on Allah to free you from the hellfire. And there are a number of narrations mentioned about this. He talks about them very specifically in the book of Brotherly Manners and the Rights of Muslims. And it's an earlier book from the series in Iḥyā. The next section, we're going to talk about the reasons that cause people to backbite, inshallah. I'll just share with you the main reasons here. So he says that there are 11 reasons he mentions. He says 8 apply to the laity and 3 apply to the clergy. So this one, actually, you know what? I'm going to change this one to inferiority complex. I think that's a better way of presenting it. So repressing anger, like which causes misdirected anger. Yeah, I'm sorry. So this is like a misdirected anger, like you just repress it so much that you end up taking your anger out and saying something about someone as a reaction. Social pressure, like, when everybody else is talking about it, you feel the need to also chime in. inferiority complex. Like you're intimidated by all these people around you, unjust, like there's no reason for you to be. So what do? You're like, this is like a preemptive strike. Let me talk about him before there's a possibility of him talking about me. Scapegoating, like blaming people for doing things, boasting, jealousy, joking, insulting. I think they're pretty clear, the reasons. And the three that apply to clergy, I found these really interesting. Exaggeration and pity and religious anger. Like you feel like you're getting angry for Allah and his messenger, so you use it as a means to kind of backbite. And these three he mentions very clearly. He said these three are the most dangerous because even the clergy fall into them, and they're supposed to know better. Yeah. So pity is like, oh, miskeen, look at his situation. And what did I do? Like I mentioned him immediately. Yeah. The other way. No, and that's the thing. Like, I mean, that's the thing with pity. If you think pity is a type of arrogance because I'm putting my emotion in front of others. What is exaggerating? It's like it's like, oh, he's such a this and that. You know what I mean? Like it is, but this is more exaggerating when it comes to specifically religious issues. And we'll talk about them. We'll talk about them inshallah in detail. And I'll mention examples of each of these. I just wanted to share you because we're short on time. I mean, one of my sons, mashallah, they wake up with wudu, bro. They got that iron wudu, man. It's like unbreakable. Gaslighting could be I think it can definitely fall here because it's basically it's like spiritual blackmail. So that over here, this is like spiritual blackmail. So I can see how gaslighting can fall into that. But even gaslighting as a concept, I don't fully grasp it myself. Like I just have like an idea of what it is. Any questions? Inshallah, like I said, we'll talk about these in detail next week, and we'll mention specific examples for them. No? All right, I'll see all of you guys next week, inshallah. Oh, can you guys just do me a favor, please, and stack the chairs in one corner?